cost of living adjustment, the COLA, that particular application process here with the City of Chicago Department of Family Support Services. Today we'll have a couple of different speakers throughout the presentation. One of them is myself. I am Raymond Barrett. I am the director of the grants team here. And so I'll be one of the contact people that you probably will reach out to at some point. Also joining us today is the Deputy Commissioner for DFSS's Children's Service Division, Srathel Burge-Burnett, Nicole Roberts, who's our Director of Accounting at the DFSS Finance Division, and Lori Walls, who's also part of the DFSS grants team, and we'll be talking about some of the governance documents. So we will get started. There'll be time throughout the presentation for questions, but feel free to pop any questions you want in the chat itself. And when we get to each of those sections, we'll address them. I know for some of you, this is kind of a normal process that you've seen. And for some of you, you probably might be new to it. And so it's a good refresher / introduction to everyone. Let me pull that. So for the agenda, we kind of already, just like I said, had the introductions. We're going to briefly overview in just broad strokes, kind of the Head Start grant, what the COLA means, why you are all getting this webinar training, and what this process will look like over the next month. We will then go through the actual application instructions. So last night / this morning, you all should have received your award letters with all these attachments. I highly recommend, if you have not done so, to go ahead and download those attachments. If you're a printer, print them out, have them to the side so you have something to reference. We will have screenshots and we'll be walking you through each of the attachments themselves, but it's sometimes nice to just have it to the side so you know what we're talking about. We will first start talking about the budget and budget narrative portions of the documents, and then we'll talk about the governance approvals. Like I said, give you all chances to ask questions throughout. So first, I'll turn over to Srathel so we can talk about the grant itself.
Good afternoon, everyone. And so one of the things that I'm going to go over really is just reminding those of you who've been with Head Start for many years and shine on a light on those who might be new regarding the Head Start funding and application process that we're going through. The dollars are appropriated through the United States Congress. They have gone through their process of budgeting and have made a determinant that there is a cost of living adjustment for all federal employees and grants. And that's why we're here today. We receive our grant directly through Health and Human Services, Administration of Children and Families, Office of Head Start. That's exactly where our dollars are funneled through. Of course, it is first appropriated through Congress, then it goes into the various departments, and for us, it comes through to us through Office of Head Start. DFSS, Department of Family and Support Services. The Children's Services Division is the division that works directly with you. There's 7 divisions here in the department, but we are one of 7. And our responsibility is to work with you in ensuring that you are getting all of the various pieces of work that is required to complete the COLA adjustment, also your grant applications on a yearly basis, et cetera, et cetera. But that information comes directly out of the department. We work internally with 3 different divisions whenever we're doing it. There's a fiscal component, the grants component, and then the program component. Children's Services is the program component. We will get everything out to you as you have received. As Raymond said, you should have received, and I've seen them because they come into my email box as well. Your award notifications with the varying forms that you need in order to complete this process. And so our job is to get everything out to you as funded agencies. And then if you look at the reverse of those arrows, your job is then to get information back to us in the time frame in which we are asking you to complete it. And I know many times there's short turnarounds, and for that we apologize. But we receive the funding notification, then we receive guidance, and then we're able to come in front of you and do what we're doing today. And so as funded agencies, you will complete the process. You will get all of that back to us, and our responsibility is then to package all of what you're giving to us and it goes back to the Office of Head Start in order for them to actually finalize and fund the COLA adjustments. And so there's a circular process here where we're all participating, and they are all referenced on time for getting it out from us to you, etc. So we're here today to help you, to answer your questions and ensure you understand what this process will be like this year. And so the grant application, it's a prescribed document. It's not something that we are creating. These things are prescribed. The communication, the goals of the program, how the dollars can be used, the things that are necessary are all wrapped in this information that you have received. And you are welcome to go on to eClick, also to look at additional information regarding COLA. This year's COLA was appropriated into law March 15th, 2022. So just short order a little while ago, so that you know, in case you did not, the amount of COLA this year is a 2.28% for fiscal year, and it goes on to the 2021 base funding level. So it is retro. It excludes training and technical assistance. These dollars are one-time funding, and it is received for this specific funding year. What is intended to do permanently, and again, permanently increase the Head Start pay scale by no less than 2.28%, and it must be applied against your recipient budget going through FY22. So retro, and then going forward through fiscal year 22. And these are salaries of your current staff. So you're going to be looking at those current salaries and making sure that you're able to make these adjustments. The one thing that I do want to point out in this slide, and I need everyone to understand, and I know there's been years where people have denied it and said we're not increasing salaries. What you will need to do first, before you can make that determinant, you must first look at the public school salaries in the district. Chicago Public Schools for us is our district. And you need to look at the elementary staff whose salaries are there that identify staff for preschool. And you need to determine whether or not your salaries are at that level before you can deny COLA to any staff that's being offered through the COLA application.
So I can take it back from here, Sir Ethel. Appreciate that. So this is Raymond, I'm back again. So just kind of let you understand the whole COLA application process more in detail. From what Sir Ethel was mentioning is that, you know, at this point today, we're at the point in which we've, you know, released out those award letters and the application instructions to you all. And today is also the day in which we're doing a webinar about it. As you have already kind of seen, and we'll go into detail for each of these stages as we get throughout the slides, but we have deadlines to facilitate the June 1st deadline that we have ultimately to provide to the Office of Head Start. And that is the deadline. June 1st is the deadline to ask Head Start for an extension in any case. Usually takes more work than it's than we want to put into it, just because it takes so many steps that we have to justify, and, you know, for good reasons, because usually to ask an extension on their part really means that somewhere we drop the ball. So we've got to make sure we get into that June 1st deadline. And so we've put in timelines or benchmarks essentially to facilitate the process appropriately. And so the point that we're going to talk about here soon is the actual grantee application. When you all turn that in on May 18th, that gives us a very quick turnaround to look at the financial documents. And then you'll have a few more days to get any agency approvals as well throughout this process on May 23rd. And then we have on those final blue dots, you can see the things that the department has to do to get everything into the system and also review. I know it's a lot of documents that you all are having to turn in, and it's a lot of documents that we have to review. And Head Start is one of the more meticulous funders, and they notice every little discrepancy. So we have to be diligent about that. You will have received this last night / this morning. These are the key documents for the COLA. Specifically, you have your funding letter, your award letter, right? That shows you how much increase. You'll have your little instruction booklet You have attachment A1, which is that Excel document, and later Nicole will walk through all the little details of it. And it has a lot of the requirements in that attachment A1. Attachment B would be your indirect cost rate agreement that you would provide to us. And then we have the C attachments, which I know it's slightly confusing, but some of the C attachments are in the A attachment. But in that C attachment, that first page, which we will talk about, we have a little checklist to show you where each of the documents are, but essentially you got to turn all of that in. And so for each one of these, we have this little checklist here to kind of show you what needs to be turned in and when. Once again, Wednesday, May 18th is the first big deadline. That is for your financial documents. So your budget narrative. And then May 23rd is the day in which all your governance approvals need to be provided. Both of these documents submitted to the COLA grant app at cityofchicago.org. We will go through this more in detail, but please, please, please make sure you're checking all these off. And you know, this is something we all have to review as well, and Head Start will review as well. As Rachel mentioned beforehand, we did not have a long time frame, so we appreciate the due diligence and the hard work that you're going to put in. If we had a longer time frame, we would love that, but that is not what was provided to us. And last but not least, just want to give some tips for the COLA. Now, luckily, the COLA is a lot easier than the grant applications in a lot of ways. But I just want to provide some of these reminders, whether you're a veteran or you're new to this. The first is to keep that little checklist handy, and also your application guide nearby. I do that as well. They are really like your key documents that show you everything you need to complete to be compliant and all the instructions on it. And if you have any questions, you know, we'll have the contact information, not just on those packets, but throughout this PowerPoint. Please reach out if you have any questions, give us a call. We're here to help out, and we want to make sure it's as smooth as possible. Also, make sure you complete each checklist for each grant that you've been awarded. You know, each part has to show documentation for each separate grant. That's just how the Head Start works. They're separate funding streams. So because they're separate funding streams, they each require sometimes multiple documentations for each of those awards. Also, when you're uploading documents and you're providing them through email, please make sure they're uploaded clearly. I know sometimes whether it's a rush or sometimes it's just like a scanner error, right? But please make sure that they're uploaded clearly, because otherwise we have to then follow up, try to get you one. Once again, the funder has a very particular expectation of what is provided, and they will want a very clear document that shows every detail on it. So when you do upload it, make sure it's uploaded clearly. And just a kind of a general recommendation is to turn in your budget documents a little bit early. I know our deadline is May 18th, but it actually helps you out as well. Usually there's not a lot of going back and forth for those particular budget documents for the COLA, but in cases that it does happen, it's nice to turn that in a little ahead of time so that when you're meeting with your boards and your approvals, that you only have to meet with them once. And in case of a change, you don't have to stress about rescheduling, et cetera. So that May 18th deadline is definitely, you know, is thinking of all of you in mind, trying to give you as much time as possible, but also highly recommend, if you can, turn in those documents early, because we will then return them back faster and helps you out for your governance approvals as well. So the first thing we're going to walk through is the budget documents, and I'll let Nicole Roberts take over and talk about that.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, Sarito. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I will be going over section 1 with you, which begins on page 5 of the grant application instructions. All right, so the first section of section 1 is the budget and budget narrative. Now, as mentioned previously, the COLA increase is 2.28%, and this should be used to first increase all of your salaries. It can also be used to increase fringe and operating costs. Now, in your funding emails that included your funding letter, we also provided your initial grant application, the final approved version. So you can reference that for everything that was included in your initial application. New costs cannot be included in your budget for the COLA application. And so you will submit the draft budget and narrative, which is included in the same Excel document in Excel form. And then we ask that you please use the naming convention here so we can track all of the documents accordingly. FY22 COLA _ your program. So you will complete a separate budget and budget narrative for each of your programs. Underscore your agency name, underscore A for attachment A. And so I will go through pages 5 through 9 of the instructions, and I'll pull up my attachment A here. Raymond, if you can stop sharing.
Hold on, I got you.
Thank you. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Okay, so when completing your attachment A, you will, starting with your funding letter, complete your COLA funding on line row 26 here. And then your total project costs and your max admin costs will automatically populate. Please also complete all of the section A, B, and C of this document. And this information will flow to the remaining tabs. Detailed salaries. So within the detailed salaries tab, you will complete the employee name, the Gabby title from the drop-down menu here. The Gabby function will automatically populate based on your selected title. Complete the agency title, the rate per pay period or hour, the number of pay periods or hours. The current gross salaries annualized will automatically populate for you. You want to indicate the percent of the time spent for each position on this specific fund that you're completing the attachment A for. The requested COLA amount will automatically populate to the 2.28%. Now, if you do have a differential rate that you will be providing, you can override this. So if I wanted to provide $400, so you'll see the rate, the increase will not change, but column 12 will show the differential rate. For any staff that you have a differential rate, you will have to include them on C2, the permanent COLA certification. You will list the employee, the position title, the annual salary or current hourly rate, the percent of the salaries charged, and the reason for not allocating the 2.28% COLA. All right, so you'll complete this for all of your staff. And then you have the ability to hide any rows that are not being utilized. And then if you scroll down, you'll see a note here. So this is a cross check that this total requested COLA amount should tie to this personnel tab, cell C67. And so this is a rounded number. So you'll see that rounded, it's $1,826. That does tie. Now, you'll notice that most of this information should flow over to the personnel tab. So we have our teacher, our disability manager, our singing mailman. And you'll see here, they all flow over. The number of employees also flows over to the personnel tab. Now, one important thing to note is that if you have positions such as, for in this example, the singing mailman, who are listed as other, that you are typing in yourself, you want to make sure that the position title is typed in the exact same way it is here on the detailed salaries tab. Because if I add a 1 here, singing mailman 1, we no longer have the singing mailman, or it does not flow the salaries and the number of employees. But if I were to add it here, the 1, it does populate. So you'll want to make sure that your total employees and your total personnel dollar amount ties to your detailed salaries. Job titles, this is just a table. There's nothing you have to do here. This helps pull over the GABI titles. And for fringes and non-personnel, you will include any portion of COLA that you are allocating to your fringes here. And then any supplies of another reminder that you cannot include additional costs. They have to be increased costs for items that you included in your initial budget. And once you're done completing all of that information, you will see at the bottom, we have, if your budget does not tie, if you are allocating over 10% of the maximum administrative costs, the errors will populate here and you'll know that you need to go back and fix your budget. So this allocation row here flows over from the cover page. So we were allocated $1,850. And so I can see I'm under budget by the $24. So if I say, let me go ahead and add, I'm just going to add this here to balance it, the error will then go away. If I added $500, I'm then over budget and my admin costs exceed the 10%. All right, so your SF 424, nothing needs to be completed here, but once you are notified that your attachment is final, you would then print this form and fill out this portion and have it signed by your board of directors, chairperson, and your parent policy committee chairperson. This same thing with the SF 424. This automatically populates. There's nothing you need to do on this tab. Other sources of funds, for any other sources of funds that you are receiving, go ahead and complete on the other sources of funds. And then your COLA budget narrative. Most of the information will flow here from your previous tabs. You'll want to make sure that you're updating all of the prompts. So everything in red or anything in parentheses, you want to make sure that you're updating. And then we have for your any other positions that you're increasing, you would list here your fringe benefits. Your amounts will flow here, and then you'll want to make sure that you're providing the prompts and indicating the calculations. There's cross checks over in column N. So if column K does not equal column N, you'll know that there is an error in your table on your budget narrative. Supplies section, again, you'll want to list everything that was initially included that you're increasing, and make sure that you do not leave any of the descriptions blank. It will get kicked back from the funder. So we need to make sure that we're including as much information as possible here. Any contractual partners that you're increasing rates for, you include in this table. Again, please make sure that you're updating the prompts. Same thing with other costs. Update the prompts, indicate what you initially included in your initial grant application and the cost that you are increasing, and a description of those costs. And for non-federal match, again, that's waived, so there's nothing you need to do in that section. And again, the last tab here is the COLA certification. So any positions that you are providing a differential rate, please be sure to include here, and then you will have to print and have this form signed by your board chair. All right, and then for attachment B, essentially the indirect cost is not really applicable for your COLA grant application because you should really be applying this to increased salaries, fringe, and operating costs that were initially included in your budget. If this is applicable to you, please provide the indirect cost rate using this naming convention along with your budget. And another reminder for section 1, you'll want to include your budget narrative in an email to us in Excel format by Wednesday, May 18th. Again, like Raymond said, if you can get it earlier, the earlier the better, so we can provide any necessary corrections to you. And we ask that if you please respond to us with those corrections as soon as possible within 24 business hours, we would greatly appreciate it. You can send it, your completed attachment A, to colagrantapp@cityofchicago.org and reach out to the COLA Grant App inbox. Myself, Sharon Davis, who is our lead accountant for the early Head Start grants, or Raymond Barrett. And for any questions regarding the number of slots that you received, you can contact Zariah Miranda with the program division. Any questions with the form, the budget narrative, and budget itself, please contact myself or Sharon Davis. And again, please submit no later than Wednesday, May 18th to the COLA Grant App at cityofchicago.org email. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, all. Now we are going to begin to discuss section 2 for attachments C 1 through 9. That is applicable to everyone who will respond to the COLA application request. Attachment number C is optional, and that is determined by each agency, and I will go into that just a little bit later on. Guidance regarding the completion of attachment C documents begins on page 10 of your application instruction packet. A few things to note as you are going through this process. Documents for Head Start and Early Head Start can be submitted as a single package, but I would remind you that on all of the documents, you are required to indicate that the approvals are for both Head Start as well as Early Head Start. There is only one exception to this rule, and that is that the SF-424s for Head Start and Early Head Start must be completed separately. All other documents can reference both programs. You are required to submit separate approval packages for your Early Head Start CCP and your Early Head Start expansion programs. These are considered separate grants, and your approval packages must come in separately. In addition to that, please note that copies of the parent policy and your agency board bylaws are required. We ask that you highlight in yellow the area within the bylaws that indicates what constitutes a quorum for each body. You are requested to, if the voting occurs via an electronic or virtual process, you will have to attach and submit copies of each vote rendered by each board member. And I will go into that just a little bit later. As you submit your documents to us, we ask that you scan them in color and submit them on May the 23rd. And with that, we will move on to the next section. If you are going to meet to secure approval, if it is anything other than an in-person meeting, you have several options. The executive committee can meet to render approval for the COLA. You can have a meeting via conference call. You can have an email meeting. But in addition to that, please note that these virtual meeting options should be indicated in your bylaws. If none of these options are available to you, or if it's not an option that is permitted to you via your bylaws, then you will have to have an emergency meeting. As Nicole discussed earlier, when you complete the SF 424, it must be signed and dated by the board chair and your policy committee chair. If it is possible to have them sign on the same document, that is ideal. If not, just duplicate the form and have each respectively sign. Please note that for, again, early Head Start and Head Start, that will be separate SF 424s, a separate one for expansion and a separate one for CCP. You must remember that as you do that, it is also incredibly important to ensure that all of the information on the SF 424, and if we can move to the next slide, is completed fully. So make sure that you have indicated your agency name, ensure that you have indicated the DUNS number for your agency, your federal identification number, and as you date the bottom, or your board chair dates the bottom of this form, make certain that the date that is indicated on the SF 424 does not precede your meeting and approval date. The next item, section number, attachment number 2, which is the certification of executive compensation. It is a very straightforward form. It requires that you indicate the agency name, that it is signed by the board chair. The individual's name is not only printed and typed, and that is just a single attachment, and that is for the agency board chair. The next approval item, this you will see for both your Parent Policy Council as well as your agency board, and that is a statement of approval. We have provided you with a template, and one of the things that we have encountered over the past, so this is just an encouragement to note, is that where it says template at the top, make certain that the information that's contained here is on your agency's letterhead. And as it references the program year at the top of the letterhead, ensure that you are capturing the correct program year, and that you, where the areas are highlighted in yellow, that you adjust that so that it is appropriate for the program for which you are funded, and only that particular program. If it is Head Start and Early Head Start, the two can be included at the top of the statement of approval. If it is for a child care partnership, that is the only thing that should be there. You should delete everything else. And if it is for expansion, you should type that in as well. The same applies for the information in the body of the letter as well. Please verify that as you complete the approval statement, that if you have both Head Start and Early Head Start, that both programs are referenced throughout the document. This will become critical when validating the authorization to proceed and the approval request. The Parent Policy Committee approval form is a standardized form which many of you are quite familiar with. We ask that you ensure that one, again, just as in with the statement form, that you indicate the specific program for which the approval has been provided, that you insert your agency name at the top of the form. And as we look at the next slide, we can see that we will have to ensure that based on your bylaws that you have indicated and provided us with the quorum that is required to approve any action by your board, as well as the number of individuals who were present at the meeting. In the columns below where you see printed name and signature, ensure that everyone who was in attendance at the meeting is listed on this form. If your meeting was held via telephone, or if your meeting was held via email, you can type the individual board member's name on the side, on the column where it says printed name. On the side where it says signature or in that column, type approved via telephone or approved via email. If you had an in-person meeting, type the board member's name in the left-hand column and ensure that everyone who was present also signs this form. The quorum number and the number of individuals who attended to approve this action must be consistent. There may be more board members that were present than are required to meet your quorum, but no less. To accompany your board approval form, you must also attach a copy of your minutes. There is no set structure. These are standard board minutes. It will capture the discussion regarding the approval of the COLA. It will indicate somewhere near the top who was present during that meeting. If your minutes are not available at the time of your submission, you can simply indicate that they are in draft form, or you can attach a placeholder. These always should be on your company's letterhead. And again, if the voting process occurred via conference call or email, we are now requesting that you provide a brief summary of that discussion. If an email went out and requested that the board members vote, then we would need to see the initial email, which introduced this action item and explained what the voting action was for. And then correspondingly, we will need to see all of the responses of those individuals who approve this action. The emails that we receive, copies of those emails should be attached to the overall approval and to the board approval form. The number of individuals should be consistent across all documents. We ask also that you provide us with a copy of your bylaws. And when you provide the copy of the bylaws, please indicate to us within the document what constitutes a quorum to make a determination. As we move forward, what you will see in the next few slides are a very similar set of documents. They are actually identical for the Parent Policy Council as they are for the agency board. We ask that you provide us with the approval form of all those individuals who were present to render that decision, whether that was an in-person meeting, whether there was a meeting via conference call or via email. We ask that all of the discussion related to the presentation of the action item be captured, as well as any sort of feedback and or discussion that occurred during that meeting. We again ask that you provide us with a copy of the agency bylaws, highlighting the area that indicates what constitutes a quorum to make a determination. As the process moves forward, there is one attachment which is not necessarily applicable to all agencies, and that is attachment number 10. In some instances, board members or agency staff have been given the authority through a policy resolution to act in lieu of a full board meeting. In those instances, you would have to provide us with a copy of that policy and or resolution that provides the authority to an individual to act in lieu of a full board meeting. This does not apply to most agencies, but if it applies to you and you have to utilize this option in order to provide us with the approvals necessary, please attach the authority document that gives you the right to do so. And with that, I would ask that all copies be submitted in full color to the email provided on the screen, and that they be submitted on the 23rd, and that as a final reminder that they be consistent across all boards. If you, for your agency board, had 10 individuals who approve this action and your quorum is 9, then please indicate the names of all 10 people who were present during that meeting or who responded to this action request that gave the authority to move forward with your COLA. And just ensure that you go back and review and make certain that all names are included and all counts are the same across all documents. And with that, I will turn the presentation back over to Raymond, who will now review key points to remember when submitting your COLA application documents.
Thanks, Lori. Yeah, and if you have any questions about that section, you can definitely just reach out to myself. My email's on there, and so is my phone number. So this kind of brings us into that, once again, the application checklist. I am bringing it up again just because I think it's really important to remind you of all the things that we've talked about today and the deadlines that are associated with them. These little checklists are throughout your application packet and your emails. But once again, you are going to have essentially 2 buckets of things you're going to turn in. The first is that bucket that is due by May 18th at the latest, and that is your attachment A, which is essentially the finance documents, that Excel document that has your budget and your COLA budget narrative. You'll also, if you haven't already, provide your indirect cost rate agreement. And then on the 23rd, you're going to be submitting all these attachment Cs, some of which are on that first Excel document. So we fully understand you may resubmit that Excel document again, but it being updated right with everything else, that is completely fine. But the main thing is we need the full color scans of everything, because a lot of those Excel documents require signatures. So make sure you print it out, full color scan it. That includes all the documents that are also in attachment C. That also includes any of your bylaws with the highlight, everything. Please make sure they are scanned legibly. When you compile your packet, your checklist, essentially you just want to make sure, I would personally, if I was doing it, I would print off each one of these and I would check them off. I would then scan them all. I would do another check for scanning each one of them, and then I would send it out to us. I know it's a lot. We have to deal with that as well when we're uploading everything into Head Start system. So we're also on the same wavelength with you on that. But that's going to get us now to our last part, which is just the questions. I hadn't seen anything in the chat, but I do want to give a few minutes if people have any questions with what you've seen. Oh, and real quick, actually, there's one thing I noted. Many of you do not have a DUNS anymore. You have this thing called a UEI, but our template still probably says organizational DUNS, and that is completely fine. Just type in your UEI. Okay, so please type in that new UEI, and if you don't have one, or if you're in the process of getting one, please just communicate with us. This was started, I believe, on April 4th or so, where the federal government switched organizational DUNS now to a unique electronic identifier. But a lot of the forms on SAM, on a lot of federal documents have not yet been updated. But please use your new UEI. Like I said, if you don't have that yet, you can just reach out to us.
There is
Okay.
one question in the chat, Raymond.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask this question to Nicole Roberts. We're getting a question. Can you review the indirect costs on COLA? Are indirect costs allowed, and will it come out of the COLA budget?
So in the funding guidance, it indicates that COLA funds should be used to increase salaries and fringe, and then any increased operating costs. So I do not believe that indirect costs apply here. If anybody interprets that differently, please chime in, but I believe that the COLA should be applied to salaries, fringe, and any increased operating costs. Indirect costs are administrative costs.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Nicole. I think when you get your budget, and if you've applied all of that COLA percentage to your staff and you still have lots of leftover somehow, we can have a conversation about it. But the COLA, allocations were very much intended for the salary portion of it, and it should cover that for the most part. But we can have a conversation if somehow that's different. Yeah, and I can go back to that slide. That is more in reference to the base grant. If you have not already submitted this, most of you should have already submitted your indirect cost rates when you did your base grant. So that's more of a general reminder. So this indirect cost rate, most of you have already done that. I think it's maybe, I don't know who this wouldn't apply to, but we should have already had this mostly on file for everyone.
That's correct.
And I see another question in the chat. Yeah, we will definitely be sending this out to everyone with the link and the slides of the recording. So you have both of those things together. Also, highly recommend if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to any of us on here as well. Any other questions? Well, we do thank you all for your time this afternoon. You will get this recording link shortly and the PowerPoint slides. And please feel free to email, call. The best time to do that is anytime before your deadline, because anytime we're reaching out to you after the deadline, our whole job is to try to not take up more of your time. Oh, we have another question real quick. It was mentioned that you needed to look at CPS salaries if you were going to deny COLA. Will you have to pay that much if you aren't paying it?
I can respond to that. This is Saratho, and no, you don't have to be paying the teacher salary right now. Of course, we'd like us to all get there. But the reason that is now in the directives is because everyone should be working towards getting higher salaries for their staff, which means the COLA is one of those opportunities for Head Start, Early Head Start staff to get an increase in their cost of living. And so do you have to be paying the current CPS staff salary? No. But if you are not and you are looking at COLA, you should be advancing your staff salaries by the 2.28% that's in the COLA agreement that you are have just received and that we're asking you to turn back around.
Any other questions? Okay, well, we will send out this recording, the link for the recording and the slide shortly after, and reach out if you have any other further questions. But I hope you have all a great afternoon.